Nicolas Cage, greatest actor of all time, or just a paycheck hack? Well, you're tuned in for another episode of Caged In with me, Petrus Patsilivus, as I talk to a guest each week to try and find out that question. This week, I'll be joined by Carl Donnelly, a fantastic comedian, podcaster, and all-around bad man. Carl chatted to me quite early on in the lockdown period, so it's quite lockdown heavy this episode, and this was one of my first ones back since having like a 2-year hiatus, because that's what you do with a Nicolas Cage podcast. You start it, you stop it, and then you come back and you talk to a comedian who you're a massive fan of as your first one. And hopefully this sounds good. Hopefully I don't sound like a bumbling idiot at all. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, you're in for a real treat. This is a fun one. There's many more in the back catalogue you might enjoy as well, and hopefully you'll be along for the rest of this journey. I'm going to chat to you more at the end, but yeah, enjoy this chat with Carl Donnelly talking about Left Behind. This week's film, we see Nicolas Cage on a plane with a ragtag bunch of criminals and retrobates trying to get back to see his daughter. No, I'm not talking about 1997's Con Air. I'm talking about the religious docudrama Left Behind. I'm joined this week by Carl Donnelly, podcast host, comedian, and newly online cookery show presenter. How are you doing, Carl?
I'm good, man. I'm currently adjusting to the new post-apocalyptic landscape.
Yes, quite an interesting film to watch, really.
Yeah, it was a weird one because it basically, for what we did was I was. Do you know what it was? I was in the queue at the farmers market on Sunday, because now you've got a queue to get in and they keep you 2 meters apart. And for some reason, I was looking on IMDb and I saw a 100 worst rated film list, and I just thought, it'd be fun to watch some of them. But I started typing each one, starting from number 1, the worst rated, to I typed each one into Netflix, and it took to number 33 until I found one of the films on the list that was actually on Netflix currently, and it just so happened to be Nick Cage's Left Behind.
Yeah,
So it wasn't picked because it was an apocalypse film. It was picked because it was just literally the only one I found as I was going down the list on Netflix. So that was what drove it. And then I found out it was very much a fitting film for the current scenario.
Yeah, because it's like I think I had a look. It's number 33 on the list. So It's not the worst of the worst. Like, I actually saw that it was nominated for some awards, and I was like, oh wow, it's like
They couldn't be bad awards, surely.
So it's 5 Razzies.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
It was nominated for the worst picture at the Houston Film Critics Society Awards in 2015. Excellent. And then one looked really promising. I was like, oh wow, like this looks like a good award, because it's like inspirational film of the year. And I was like,
what was the awards?
The GMA Dove Awards.
Is that a Jesus award?
It is a Jesus award. Yeah. Yes, it lost out to a film called Mum's Night Out, which, like, from reading the first reviews, it was like, I just loved the Christian morals in this. I was like, oh, here we go.
It's a perfect, if you actually watch the film, it's, in terms of how it's made and things, it's not that. But you can watch B movies that are so badly put together. The design, the set, everything is so shit. But this film, actually, how it's made isn't the issue. The acting's not that bad. Nick Cage actually seemingly is quite calm in it. He sort of he carries it himself pretty well in it. But what you learn from, I think, watching this film is any film that's made from a position that you can tell that the people who writing it know exactly what they want to say, and it's about Christianity and how Jesus is the way.
Yeah.
And to write anything creative from that perspective, what you see in this film is just it can't work, because it's so everything has to like follow the same moral path, so that there's no jeopardy to the film at all, even though it should be about something really dramatic. It's not. It just makes it really boring because you know what it's all about.
Well, yeah, a lot of it's like shoehorned in as well. Like, do you know what I mean? And like, it's just, I don't know. It's like a klaxon goes off of like here we go. Like
Yeah.
the music for one in this
Oh mate,
film.
I will say it's got the worst soundtrack I think I've ever heard in a film. It feels like they spent all the budget on Nick Cage, and the guy, the editor, they've gone to him. Look, mate, we've got no budget for music, so can you just nick like some royalty free bullshit off YouTube? It's crap.
Well, it's just like tonally as well, because obviously, like a lot of scores, they're either there in the background, kind of just not doing much, or like creating like an atmosphere, or they
Yeah,
tell you how to feel.
yeah,
Whereas this kind of like didn't know how to tell you how to feel. It was just like, right, we got some Kenny G style like sax
yeah,
going on. Then all of a sudden we've got like some Hallmark channel like piano going on. It's just like really
yeah.
disorientating.
Yeah, it didn't. None of the music just didn't match the emotion. Like there's a scene where basically no spoilers, but this is actually quite a big spoiler. The daughter of Nick Cage basically looks like she's about to commit suicide. She decides that she realizes she had. Well, I suppose it won't ruin anything if we tell people it's about the rapture. So it's about end of days. God takes millions of people up to heaven, and anyone who didn't make the cut stays on earth for the end of days. Essentially, that's what the rapture is. The Nick Cage's daughter realizes she didn't make the cut, and she just goes, "Well, what's the point?" She walks to the top of. She somehow gets from her house to the top of, like I think, like it must. I think it's New York, so I'm assuming it's like Brooklyn Bridge or I don't know what bridge it is, and she's just suddenly gets to the top of it, and she's going to kill herself, and then the song that kicks in, it sounds like a sort of I wouldn't even know how to describe it. Something from like Hannah Montana, like just this like
Yeah, like
slave
it's
singing.
teeny bop Christian rock, basically, isn't it?
It,
Like kind of
it
like
it takes out any of the emotional drama of what is essentially gonna be or could be. You know, well, let's not spoil. Well, we can actually. I do
yeah,
want
yeah,
to.
yeah. We can spoil it. I guess a lot of people who listen to this either don't want to listen to us suffer through it,
Yeah,
or want to like will probably watch along anyway. So
I'd
like,
watch it just for, yeah, because this scene, like, you're meant to be thinking this girl is about to kill herself, but she realizes she is not good enough to make it to heaven. And this song kicks in and just totally destroys any of the drama. It's like it's one of the worst decisions I've ever seen an editor make on a film.
well, like other like the casting choices in this are weird as well, because I often thought like, why are these people like doing this? Like Cage has come out in an interview, I believe your wife like pointed out during the like live Twitter thing, that his brother is a pastor and like
Yeah,
is a massive fan of the book, and was like, oh come on mate, you gotta do it, like do one for the family. Like,
yeah. It's I mean, but yeah, it's and oh, I mean, in terms of characters, like the selection of characters is so like it feels like in the when the writers were writing it, they were like, right, so we've got it's mainly set in that first class carriage of the plane.
which like the set design for the plane is
It's
bonkers.
I know I said on Twitter about it. It looks like the set designer's never been on a plane before, which is
Well, it
like
just looks massive, like it like
every seat is enormous.
like, and
But
just the general carriage as well. There's like, this could have been great if they had like just used like an old plane or something. Like, do you know what I mean? Or
yeah, yeah,
just filmed it
totally,
like, got that real sense of like, even if it wasn't about religion, just being on an actual plane, that claustrophobic nature, and like
definitely,
knowing like you've got to try and like land it, and like shit's going down, basically the
yeah, yeah,
wing's
yeah,
on fire. Having that claustrophobic like carriage would have been
yeah,
amazing. Whereas like this is just like, it it looks like a cinema. They look like they're sat in one of those swanky cinemas up in like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
first class. The
definitely.
seats are ridiculously massive.
And like just the selection of characters. So when you go into first class, the sort of character you're following is the journalist who's like meant to be a famous journalist, and he's like the good guy who cares about everyone. And then he sits next to a massive fat black guy who's like saw him chatting up a woman at the airport and was like, "Hey, you get that number?" And then then you've got the nice old couple who just want to talk to everyone. Then you've got an angry dwarf for some reason. You've got the Muslim guy who everyone's suspicious of. It's
Yeah.
like you go round and it's just like this is such a bad like it's almost like you're writing. It's like your 15-year-old wannabe film student who's writing their first script, and it's like we need one of these, one of these, one of these.
Yeah, and we've got the director's daughter who plays the like druggie who's managed to like sneak on a bit of like bit of smack or something onto the plane, but she's
Yeah,
pretty much channeling Kristen Wiig's character from
yeah,
Bridesmaids. Basically, she's kind of like just slumped down in her chair most of the film
yeah,
until
yeah,
they need someone to explain a bit of like exposition. Then all of
yeah,
a
yeah.
sudden, she's like, "You know what, guys? All them
It's
Sundays of like of Bible
yeah.
class are paying off right now."
It's also, I tell you, it's a really you can always tell when a film writer and director have never ever experienced or met or spoken to anyone who has used the drug that they've got in the film. You know what I mean? You can see it. I saw it in, and this is I'm not digging him out or digging the show out, whatever as such, but like Ricky Gervais did it in that Afterlife, his new last show he did. He had a heroin addict in it
Yeah,
who
yeah, yeah.
literally was the least authentic heroin addict I've ever seen, and it felt like Ricky Gervais wrote that show without thinking I should probably do some research and meet some heroin addicts to see what they're like. Like, 'cause it was so inauthentic. Even when he tries heroin, like it doesn't look or sound like you
Like
don't act like that when you take
he-
heroin for the first time.
heroin addict with the teeth of a Colgate advert. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
and that's what this felt like. This character who just gave loads of exposition. Just she goes off at one point and she snuck some heroin on the plane and she takes it and just she comes out of the like toilet and you're like, like unless she did like the smallest amount of heroin of all time, she comes out and she's basically just exactly the same as she went in, just a tiny bit more chilled out. It's like
Well, yeah,
it's
because
not how it works, mate.
from what I know from like I don't know, just pop culture and like know like knowing about, do you know what I mean? Like pop culture and whatever, learning about heroin. Like I'm just desperately trying to make it sound like I've never done heroin here. um, like she would have been out for that entire flight, basically, like a good like a few like 7 hours gone.
Especially she injected it as well. It's not like if she smoked it, you'd probably get a tiny bit
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's a tiny bit of leeway to get back to your seat maybe before you fucking fall to pieces. But she's injected that. She ain't coming out of that bathroom straight away, just walking back to her seat to have a chat.
Well, another person who's in first class as well is the mother of a little girl who disappears,
Yes.
whose like ex-husband is a famous like basketball player.
Yeah.
Um, she is played by Jordan Sparks. I'm not sure if you remember the song "No Air" with like I think it's with Chris
Oh,
Brown.
right. Yes. I didn't know that was
She's
her.
she sung that, and
No,
it's
no,
just
no, no,
insane.
no. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And like, that's what I was like. The point I was trying to make was like, are these like, what did these people or like, what did the writer or director have on these people to get them in the film, or were
I
they
mean,
compelled by the religious aspect?
yeah, I
Like,
would say there's definitely a couple of them went in it for the religious reasons, but I reckon the rest, I wouldn't never don't put it past an actor to do something that they think is utter dog shit just for money and the credit. You know what I mean? Acting is one of the hardest things in the world to get work.
oh,
So
definitely. Yeah, yeah. I remember listening to an interview with Stephen Graham just saying at the end of the day, he looks at it like he's a painter decorator.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you've got to, if you've got to pay the bills, you've got to pay the bills. If it's like
Definitely.
Martin Scorsese or if it's Vic Armstrong in this case,
Yeah,
like
and
the
also
work's
I
the
know
work.
that's what a lot of people I know. I'm always very reticent to take the piss out of sort of actors doing bad things, unless they do stuff that I think is genuinely offensive or something. But I think it's a lot of actors just if they're out of work, they'll do it for the work. They'll also do it because they might. Every film has so many people working on it. They might do that film with the casting director might also be casting something else that is better. I mean, casting directors cast all sorts of shit. So I genuinely think that often people who don't know anything about the actual industry, I think just be like, oh, what's he doing in that? And actually, they probably don't realize there's a thought process. They might be thinking, if I do this casting director that's done it is also I know casting this new series or whatever. So often there's a little bit of a, just keeping an eye on their career, sort of.
Well, that's one
Little,
of the things I've learned from doing this podcast is just obviously at first I think I was a bit hard on Nicolas Cage, but like I've grown to massively love him, and like
yeah,
especially now I'm kind of amidst the films that are like some years it's a solid like 5 per year,
yeah,
and it's I like that scattergun approach because a lot of them are like your stereotypical straight to DVD thrillers and stuff like
yeah,
that, and like it's a lot of him just looking off into the distance on the poster and stuff like that. But throughout it, you get these kind of like little gems of like
right.
films that are kind of like weird art house films like Mandy and stuff like that, just kind of capitalize on the mania that he can bring to the screen.
Yes. Well, that's what I was weirdly actually. I found him very restrained in this film. I was sort of hoping for a bit of, the bit of the madness, and actually, it feels like he has a bit of reverence for the fact that it's about God. It's almost like he was like, I should probably just wind my neck in a bit during this and
Well,
not.
it's a very strange choice because like from like doing research into him as a person, he's very much into like voodoo and like he's a very like he owned a house in New Orleans, like supposed like famously supposed to be haunted,
Does
and
he own
was
a house in England? Does he own a castle or something in England? So I
yeah
once heard rumours that he owned some crazy, I think like a
yes
haunted house in England.
it's in like Bath, like
Yeah,
because I think around like New Year's this year, like just gone, he was in a pub in Dorset and just brought everyone around.
quality.
So like he's got this kind of crazy like I don't know private life where he's into like it seems like I'm not saying he's like into the occult and stuff like that, but like
Yeah,
doesn't strike me as someone who's very like very religious and like throughout his time has probably like dabbled in a lot of drugs. For
yeah,
instance, look at the Terry Wogan
the
like
best.
ah
It's the best entrance to a chat show interview of all time, isn't it?
yeah, I'm sure. Of like, would you ever consider that as like the start of like an Edinburgh show? Out there, bang! Here he is, Carl Donnelly.
Oh yeah, it's a good idea. Actually. Come out of a proper, yeah. I mean, he's. I mean, I genuinely like. He gets a bit of shit, but I'm a massive fan of his. Like for every stage of his career, there's always a film that I'm like, yes, now this is what he's all about.
Well, yeah,
Because even like sort of watching the remake of Bad Lieutenant and stuff, you see him at his like most gross, like extreme. I thought I think he's an excellent actor.
yeah, but that film as well is one of those ones I was talking about where it's like it's directed by Werner Herzog, who's kind of just
Yeah,
like this renowned art house like director, but in amongst that, he's doing all these other weird films and like in that period especially, he's doing like G Force and like Astro Boy and stuff like that. Like
not seen those.
kind of
I'm
like
trying,
stuff for Disney and like
yeah,
it just come off doing like the National Treasure films. But then
I love the National Treasure films. I genuinely love them. They would be. I'm trying to think what I'd put them in a category of films like almost like Goonies in the sense of there's something that if they're on over Christmas or Easter or something, I can't not watch them. I find them, they're proper like the original Mummy, not the original Mummies,
yeah
but the
yeah yeah
Brendan Fraser Mummy films. There's something totally enjoyable about sitting and it's a good adventure film.
well it's that thing as well. It's like I can't help but like when I watch those films think about like being in that situation of just like because a lot of time it would be like a relatively like normal looking room and just like the
Yeah.
idea of like the Goonies, like they go to that kind of like run down restaurant and then it's
Yes.
like this whole world of like treasure and like pirates underneath and stuff like that, and it's just like that thing of like him stumbling upon these like
Yeah. Yeah.
hidden
Yeah.
things, like whether it's on the desk in the White House and stuff like that, or in like
Just that. I love that stuff. Just
yeah, yeah,
him
yeah.
sneaking around the White House.
And I don't think like I don't know like the Uncharted games on like the PlayStation, they're pretty much like National Treasure the
Right.
game, and it's like that as soon as I kind of saw a trailer for one of those. I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
that's amazing. Like, it's like
yeah.
you pretty much get to play as like, yeah, Benjamin Gates, like just wandering around finding all this like weird treasure and shit like that.
But I just have a look at his IMDb because I genuinely I've not seen much. You know, in the last few years, this is probably one of the most recent Nick Cage films I've watched. Like, I'm trying to look down, even going down now. I've not seen anything in the last. See, I've not seen Mandy. I reckon the last film I probably watched of his that I met the producer of the USS Indianapolis, Men of Courage. It's the weirdest experience. I've just going down his list. That was in 2016. I was on stage at the Comedy Store about 2 months ago in London, and there was a woman and her husband on the front row who I recognised. Turns out she was quite a well-known journalist back in the sort of the 90s. Her husband was I think a Liberal Democrat MP, and sitting next to them was one of the most bizarre-looking people I've seen. Like, he looked like a character from a film. He was wearing an incredibly sharp pinstripe suit. He had sunglasses on, like proper sunglasses, indoors at 8:30 at night. He had slick back hair. He was probably about 6'4", very good looking, probably 50-year-old. And I asked his name, and he told me it. And I sort of said, "Look, I've got to ask, man, what do you do? Because you look like you've come in dressed like a film character." And he said he was a film producer, and I was like, "What?" And I didn't believe him. And then I chatted to him a bit, and I said, "What's the last film you produced?" And he said, "I produced USS Indianapolis of Nick Cage." And I was like, "Shut up!" And we had a bit of fun. I took the mick out of him a bit, but it was actually good fun. And then it turns out it was true. I looked him up on IMDb, and it was him. And then we had a chat at the break. He was a proper film producer, like an American, full of himself, but nice.
That's amazing. That's
But yeah,
amazing, man.
but I haven't seen the film, so I'm going back down now. I'm trying to think the last sort of proper film I saw. I mean, this is it. 2014 was Left Behind. That's the most recent film of Cage's I think I've watched, because I saw Joe, which was obviously from the year before, and I really liked. And before that, I mean, I tried to watch Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. That was horrendous. Drive Angry was not good. Do you know the one before that? Do you know what I really enjoy, even though it's kind of crap, but I've got a lot of time for it? Is The Sorcerer's Apprentice.
So yeah, I'm yet to watch that, but I've just recently got a Disney Plus
Yeah,
account, and like I saw that it was on there, and I was like, oh, amazing! Like, obviously,
give it a go. He's very. I think he's great in it. It's proper. It is. He sort of plays it a bit different. I just don't know. Something off in it about it, like the way he played that character. I really like, and it's a very good sort of fantasy film. You know, it
amazing.
travels through. It covers a lot of time in the film, like where it starts and where it ends. And he plays a wizard very good. I'd say.
See, that's what I mean. That's what he's like. He seems like he's more into is like
Yeah,
the world of wizarding, not so much the world of like the Bible. That's like his performance, almost like he seems scared to like offend, and like I always find, and like I did a Twitter poll for this to find out what people thought, because my criteria to find out like what Cage's performances are like is his hair mental?
yeah.
Does he like do a strange voice like in some way, or like kind of, I'm not sure if you've ever seen the film Vampire's Kiss, but like he's got
No.
this, it's an absolute whirlwind of a film.
Okay.
It's kind of like a prerequisite for American Psycho, kind of like this ad executive
Okay.
who thinks he's becoming a vampire basically.
Yeah.
um but he's got this kind of voice that is from another planet. Just kind of like it's part Bill and Ted, it's
Yeah.
part Where the Fuck Are You From?
Love it.
But
He's not really. That's the thing. You know, he's in terms of acting style. He's not really an actor who becomes another person. He's one of them. He's one of them actors who is a star. You know, he's got that sort of charisma where he makes the character part of him. Right. You know, it's that different style of acting. You'll see a one of them proper character actors who'll just disappear into the character and they become this thing. Whereas Nick Cage, you're always watching, this is that character if it was Nick Cage, essentially. So when he tries to do an accent, it's like, come on, mate, you go into Con Air time, innit? Where it's like, oh, come on, this accent is absolutely mental.
But what I found, so yeah, the last one is so there's hair, voice, and
Yes.
how much does he freak out.
Yeah.
But I find the most enjoyable is when those boxes are ticked.
Yes.
Whereas this one, like none of them are really ticked. He doesn't freak
No.
out. He's kind of just got your number two on a barber's wall from the
Yes.
'90s,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's like his voice is just like, if anything, he sounds quite subdued. He
Mm,
just like
definitely.
he has that reverence for the source material.
Yeah, I'd say if his brother's a priest and that, and it's a film about God, I'd say he was a little bit probably, thinking, I don't want to do anything that's going to upset anyone.
Um, so you mentioned earlier the IMDb score. So this got 3.1,
Yes.
which is pretty bad, right?
Have you checked it on Rotten Tomatoes?
1%.
1% critic score, audience score is
35,
I think it's
36.
about I think it's 36 or 38%. But I suspect a lot of those are God fearing
Well,
Christians.
the thing is, like, a kind of audience score, I'm not like, I'm always wary of, because these are the same people we allow to vote.
That's it. I love it. I find it really fascinating when people say, like, people talk about I am Rotten Tomatoes score and be like, yeah, but look at the audience score. When something quite culturally cool gets slammed by the critics. It happened with remember Dave Chappelle's special came out,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
some of the critics sort of dug it out a bit, and it was like, yeah, was saying, why is he talking about some of these things? So critically, it looked pretty, average, and then but it got like 99% sort of, but I think I saw like people using that as a sort of some example of why always trust the audience score. And I was watching comedians say that, like, you do not, that is not correct. I know
Well,
it sounds horrible, but the audience is not always right.
it can work in the like reverse as well, where something is critically like applauded, but for some reason, like you find it a lot with the like superhero films, you just have like brand loyalty. So like DC fans will go out and just
Yeah,
the
yeah,
new
yeah,
Avengers film, just even before it's even out, just
yeah,
slam it so the audience score looks terrible, and it's
yeah, yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's based upon it's based upon nothing. So
But
like
also, I don't think you should ever judge a piece of work like that is a film, music, and theatre, whatever. You should never you should never base it entirely on group think. Do you know what I mean? Like, if it was based on pure numbers and ratings, then fucking Marvel, whatever shit, would be the best film of all time, wouldn't it? Whereas, like, I'm not a fan of Marvel films. I know I'm just not really my thing.
yeah,
But I watch them because I watch them on a plane because they're a plane film or something to me. And I'll sit there and I'll enjoy it, but I'll find a lot of the writing on it pretty shit, and I
yeah,
think
yeah.
there's too many characters in a film. I don't think you should have more than about two or three main protagonists to make a good story. That's my thoughts on storytelling. But so I watch them films and think, oh, this is a bit of fun, but it's not a great film. But I know people that would sort of argue that fucking Endgame is one of the best films of the last decade, and I'm like, you're mental, mate. It's not. It's one of the most. It's a significant film because of the size of it and what it means to the end of a saga. But compare it to flipping, I don't know, Dancer in the Dark, or put it against a film that is a work of art and it's absolute dog shit. Do you know what I mean? That's why I never trust the number. I never trust the sort of or audience ratings.
Well, that is the thing. Like I've always found is there is stuff that is critically and like even audience score like isn't good, and it's just totally subjective. Like
Yeah, of
because
course.
and there is this very much like you say about the Marvel thing. There's this very much art versus commerce like
Yeah,
argument that is to be had like a lot of the time, and like bringing it back to like yeah Nick Cage, like he's someone I found who has like flirted with both sides of that
totally.
and like
Absolutely.
has got the best of both worlds, because even like The Rock, like that mid '90s stretch of like
Yeah,
The
yeah,
Rock,
yeah.
uh Face Off, Con Air are just leave your brain at the door popcorn style.
Totally. Proper action films, which actually sort of died out for quite some time.
But some of his like best best received films across the board. Like, I think Face Off has like a solid like 90% like audience score
Yeah,
and
yeah,
high critical acclaim as well. Like,
yeah. Because I think that's where I think, like, you know, a really great action film, critically, I think you can totally critically see why it deserves some plaudits. Like, I remember like watching the film Crank, with Jason Statham, and that started the new wave of action films. You know,
yeah,
because action films like sort of came into their own in the 80s, and there was what you'd call an action star, and they came through. And Face Off and that seemed to be at the end of that
yeah,
sort of almost the end of the real action era. And then it died off for a bit, and then Crank. I feel like Crank was the sort of starting point of the new wave, and now you've got all these like Expendables and these films with like wrestlers in and stuff, and I think they come off the back of that really. But Crank, if you look at it, is critically you could say it's almost the perfect action film. It
so
starts and ends, and there is no let up, but a
yeah, yeah,
whole
yeah,
thing
yeah, yeah, yeah.
builds and builds, and it's pure action, and it's funny, and it's got loads of just. It's got a solid action star who's just good looking, muscly, and a bit self aware. That's what you need as
Yes.
well.
So the one of the directors of that is the directing pair Neville Dean and Taylor. I'm
Yeah.
actually interviewing Brian Taylor
Oh,
on
wicked.
this podcast because they directed Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance,
Oh,
but
maybe I need to watch that then.
his
Rather than I started it and went, not for me, thank you.
his solo effort as his first solo effort as a director was a film called Mum and Dad with Nicolas Cage,
Right.
which is him and Selma Blair. And the premise again is just like he's really good with these just like off the wall premises, like the Crank film. So it's like
Yeah.
you, it's like speed, but your heart slows down, you die.
Yeah. I mean, that is the perfect action
Yeah,
premise.
exactly. This premise is um, airwaves go out on your TV that's like
Yeah.
make you want to kill your children.
Excellent.
So it is Nick Cage at his fucking like most
Definitely.
yeah like
What year is that
caging.
from? I'll watch that. What year is it from?
2007, 16 or 17, I
Oh,
think.
so yeah. So yeah. So I need to dip into the last 5 years of Cage.
So yeah, I'm gonna talk to him about like that. But yeah, he is like the the director. Well, yeah, part of that kind of duo who created this.
I
Like,
love it. It's that thing that that's why I think, and again, because I'm a bit of a ponce with certain films and TV. Now I do like things to be a bit more, I don't know, arty, and I think have a bit more to them than a lot of the stuff that is successful nowadays. But I'd love a well made action. Like I think Face Off and all that, Con Air again. You look at just the conceit of it, they've picked something that is just so it's quite dumb, but they just go, right, this is it, and we're going to commit to this. Face Off. That concept is such nonsense, but I love it. Sorry, I thought that claim was your end. Um, Ironic, I mentioned Con Air and that happened. The Face Off as well. Just the concept of that is mental, but they commit to it to such a degree that you don't question it at any point of the film. That this is fucking nonsense.
well, yeah, if you like landed on Earth from another planet and kind of got shown John Travolta and Nicolas Cage and went,
Yeah,
I've got a film for you where he
yeah,
plays him and he
yeah,
plays him. Sign me up. It's like
yeah, yeah.
it's amazing. And like you saying about like enjoying action film stuff like that. Did you enjoy Left Behind? Like, because it's I don't know. How would you describe it really? Like,
I
it's
enjoyed it much more than like we were sort of all talking about it on Twitter as we were watching it, and there was a few people that really hated it, and but I actually think most people were enjoying it more than we realised we would when it because it was. I think also the first 10 minutes of it is bad. It feels like you're watching a Hallmark. You're watching a true movie. It's 2 in the afternoon. One of them crap. It just everything feels like an advert in it. It feels like you're watching a 15-minute advert for something you don't know what it's selling because the crap music, the bad sort of soft focus. Everything just felt like I thought this is going to be crap. And then Cage comes in, they get on the plane, things start feeling a bit more like it was like there were some funny choices, like the bit with the U2 concert tickets just was such a weird concept to be like for dialogue, and he's obviously having a bit of an affair with one of the stewardesses. So they start creating a bit of that, and I was like, all right, I'm into this. And then actually, when the moment happens, the rapture happens, I actually thought that bit was very. I thought it really caught me off guard. And at that point, I was like, all right, I'm into this. I'm into this enough now. I can deal with all the bad bits. I'm now in. I'm into it enough that I'm going to commit to the rest of it. And
Well,
then it goes quite mental. So actually, I found it quite entertaining.
well, it is just a crazy, like, if you took out the religious aspects of it, it would be like it's a great premise for a film.
Yeah.
Just
Yes.
this kind of like, yeah, people disappearing is like what the fuck anyway. Like,
Well,
it's
have you
quite
ever seen Leftovers?
no, yeah. There's
But
two
then that,
shows, isn't there? There's that and
well,
there's the event as well, isn't
there's
there?
or there's the Returned or something.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
another. But the Leftovers is I reckon it's my favorite ever television series. It actually weirdly it didn't like do, but like numbers wise, it didn't do that well. But it did well enough. But like it's in some lists, it's listed as the best television series of the last decade, and it's made by the people that made Lost, so it's got that weird, slightly what's
well,
going on vibe, and it's
this
about
film,
that.
this film had like kind of in moments, it was like this feels like just a badly acted episode of Lost,
Yes,
especially when they're all like kind of standing around, like going, "Oh, what's going on?" And like, there's like comes out of nowhere. Really, there's like an Asian scientist, isn't there? Just
yeah,
on the plane. Feels like again a bit of like questionable casting of
yeah. The
like
angry dwarf and the Asian sort of experts
yeah,
just
yeah.
happen to be both in first class.
Get some glasses on him. He's
Yeah,
smart. And like I get like some of it in that regards didn't feel like utilized. I thought there was going to be more of like a subplot with the oil tycoon guy,
yeah,
like
yeah,
this
yeah,
kind of guy with a string tie, and I thought like they built it up because you kind of like the first scene you have of him, he's on the phone like kind of cutting a deal, and you think
yeah, yeah,
he's going to be a prick, and there's going to be some kind of narrative arc where he like redeems himself over the film, and he just kind of gets like left behind to like
yeah, 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 yeah.
like, and it's a lot of those like plot
Yeah.
plot threads kind of just get like brushed to the wayside.
Well, that's what I actually felt like. It was. It would take a good film writer and filmmaker to do that film right, because, like, if you compare it to basically the Leftovers is about almost exactly the same thing, but you never ever find out over three full series. You never find out why those people disappeared. Like it could be the Rapture, it could have been Alien. No one knows what it is. But what's really interesting about the Leftovers is it starts on that moment. So literally, in 2 minutes into the first episode, millions of people disappear just at thin air, and then it just shows the reaction for about 10 seconds, and then it cuts, and it starts a year later. It's like it just starts up with how would the world try and move on away from that with that lack of knowing and understanding, like how do you go back to normal when something that weird has happened. And it just goes into this three series of people. Some people have lost their minds and become religious zealots. Some people just sort of block it out and try and act like nothing happened. Some people are just sad because they lost their whole family. Some people are confused because no one they know disappeared. And it's just they're the interesting questions. Whereas this film felt like it happens and you just know why it's happened. It's a rapture because they've talked about God for the first half of the film. They keep dropping in these biblical references, and the second half of the film just becomes they're trying to land the plane somewhere. So I just felt like it asks an interesting question but doesn't answer it in any. Or not answer it. You don't need to answer it. That's what the Leftovers doesn't answer it. But what the answers it does give you is how, like, what would certain people do in that situation. I don't think the film did any of that. I thought it was quite a boring way of dealing with that.
Well, because this is like based on like a book like series, and like there's multiple films that have been made before. Like it kind of felt like a budgetary like restraint in the fact of like it could have been a lot broader if they were dealing with the
Yeah.
rapture, whereas they're like, well, if we just put it on a plane,
Yes.
it's kind of like it's like a capsule. Do you know what I mean? It's like an episode of TV
Yeah.
that they kind of like are trapped in somewhere, or like, or it's
Yeah.
like,
And also, I think if it's made, I imagine the book series by all counts are probably very entertaining because if it's about the rapture and the fallout, then that's the interesting stuff in it. And I imagine you could get loads of stories out of that and how people react. And so I just think this film, to have something so big happen and try and just make it work in an hour and a half set on a plane, you'd have to have an incredible film writer
well, it
and
is
director to make it work. And actually, I think it just feels like it's a bit all over the shop and they didn't really know how to make it work.
it is that thing of like yeah, I don't want to just shit on religion, but if this didn't have that religious aspect, a good if not well drawn like premise anyway of like a plane in distress and it needs to land. But if it took out like you were saying about the leftovers, if it took out that religious aspect and it was just like a plane's got to land and loads of people have disappeared,
Yeah,
then it's like, well, what the fuck's going on? Like,
yeah,
whereas
yeah,
this, like you said, like you know why they've gone. Like some people, I don't know how they didn't go. Like, there's an old lady on the plane who like
yeah.
brings like one of the like moments of like light relief at the beginning, which is kind of like, oh, we're home. She's kind of like just shown to be like senile again, not really like she's built up and then just brushed to the side. But I like to think that she didn't disappear because she forgot she was religious.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is it. This is all the questions that could have been raised in the film. Like, you've got like there's a bit cuts to the daughter, and she goes and sees a priest, and the priest hasn't disappeared, so he didn't make the cut. So the storyline of why didn't he? That would be such a more interesting storyline than them trying to land the plane. You know what I mean? It felt like it almost the question if you'd want all the stories about why people didn't get to go to heaven. I think are where that film could have gone. It could have been if they'd have just known what they were doing a bit, or gone for that rather than that's not the questions they want to answer in it. They've got their idea of it's just about the rapture
Well,
happens
yeah,
and then
because in the first like 10 minutes, you know it's like the rapture, basically. Well, like
totally,
when it
it's
happens,
a God film.
the moment it happened. Whereas like if they had brought that like the disappearance in earlier, they could have explored like if in Act One we had met the priest and
Yeah,
then kind of had like him teaming up with the daughter and like kind of a bit of
yeah, yeah,
background on him,
yeah.
like what dirt has he done? You know what I mean? The old dirty bugger.
Well,
Like,
that's it. Like what has a priest got to have done? What was his life before he went into the priesthood that he didn't make it into heaven? I was like, fuck, man, that's some interesting stuff. But they don't. Yeah, I just felt like the filmmakers didn't really. It's almost like they didn't notice that these things could have been interesting. That always worries me when you watch a film and you're like, oh my god, the film like they've missed so many good
yeah.
ideas.
Well,
So,
it's
yeah.
that
It
thing
was
of like,
so I found it entertaining but frustrating is what I did because I kept thinking where that could have gone, where that could have gone. Why is he still there? Why is she still there? So yeah, and
like,
yeah, just and the end was so rushed. Once they land the plane, they had this mad sort of almost Die Hard 2 style ending where the plane lands, and I thought he's reunited with his daughter, and there's going to be this moment where now what? But actually, they have that bit. I felt it was so rushed. Like they get off the plane and there's about 2 minutes worth of dialogue, and then the credits roll. I was like, what the fuck? You can't end it there.
well, it's quite bizarre as well at the end because his daughter has met like Chad Michael Murray's character, the journalist, maybe for like 10 minutes at the start, like real time,
Yeah,
like in real time, they kind of had a chat, have a coffee,
yeah,
and then she rushes off the plane, kind of bins off her dad, and is straight over to Chad Michael
yeah.
Murray, and it's like
So weird. Yeah, there's a
it,
lot of strange stuff like decision making going on in that.
there's been no yeah, and again, there's no real character development to you to like care about them two hooking up at the end,
Absolutely not. Nothing.
and like I find it bizarre as well because obviously it is a religious film, but we are left in the like company of the heathens, basically, and these are the people we're supposed to be rooting for because these are the
Yeah.
people not good enough to get to heaven, basically. Like,
But also that's the strange thing I found with it. It's meant to if it's made by people that believe in that sort of concept, actually what you see is the daughter seems very nice. She's out, you see the Chad, what's his name? Chad Michael
Murray,
Murray.
he
His
was like,
character, like, his character seems like a really good guy. He's around helping everyone, and there's loads of the old lady. There's loads of characters that you're like, these seem like really nice people. So actually, if they didn't make the Rapture, I'm not too keen on the idea of the Rapture. Like, if they didn't make it, then God seems to have made some questionable decisions.
oh, if they didn't make it, I'm definitely like, do you know what I mean? I'm definitely going down.
That's what I mean. So it felt like actually it creates this idea of a sort of judgmental God. My bedroom door's just opened on its own as I just
Oh,
criticised God. Holy shit! The rapture's come for me, mate. Let me just shut that. Strange business.
So Carl's now shut God out of the room. back
When
to the blasphemy.
disappeared, guys. He's now it's a little puff of dust happened.
It's just a black t-shirt on screen and some headphones hit the floor. That was one of my like highlights, was that kind of scene of just like the costume department must have had like a real good day of just being like, we just got to pick out outfits that are going to drop to the floor like on
I know.
cue.
One of the funniest tweets I saw while we were watching it from somebody who was watching it was really just like, there was a bit, basically, the scene where it first bang happens and people just disappear. The daughter is hugging her little brother, and literally he disappears in the clothes. She suddenly is just hugging empty clothes, which is like, and that I actually found that, even though I think the effects were all right, but that moment I thought was the best moment in the film in terms of that. I was like, oh, that is if this did happen, that would be the shocking thing. If you were literally holding someone and they just disappeared. But loads of clothes start falling
from the sky. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. And somebody just said on Twitter, was like, hang on, those clothes that fell in the mall, did that mean there was loads of people just walking around the sky? And it is, there's just weird things like that. But actually, that moment itself, I liked. What I didn't like then was, again, they had people looting within about 2 minutes. It's like, that's not how people, people would be too confused the looting wouldn't start for a day or two, I don't reckon.
Well, one of the gaffes on IMDb, because obviously it lists all like the factual inaccuracies and stuff like that. One of them is that literally within seconds of the rapture happening, the news are like reporting on it, and it's like, how quick are your reporters? Like,
I know, it's nonsense. It just feels that's what it felt like. It felt like the film was really rushed.
Yeah, there's like the list of like gaffes and inaccuracies on this is 48 entries long.
Right. Sorry, you cut out a bit there, man. It went a bit robot.
Yeah, the gaffes is like 48 entries long of like mistakes in this film.
Lovely.
And it's like even down to like locations and stuff like that. When the plane takes off at the beginning, it's supposed to be like JFK, and it was filmed at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam.
European, actually.
Yeah.
I felt that's interesting.
And like, I think a car crashes into the mall at one point, and the engine's revving, but there's no one driving it, which wouldn't happen. And it's just like,
there's loads of stuff like that. Just like loads of weird things when after the school bus is one, and it just felt odd, like sort of all these weird. They were just trying to show funny, empty things. I just felt like it all felt a bit rushed and put together in a bit of a haste.
One of the things that I think like is the biggest question in this film is, why is everyone now naked if they've gone to heaven? Like, why didn't the clothes go with them, or is it a
hang on a second. Right. Don't know what's going on. I think my wife's taken a delivery or something. There's a lot of noise.
Yeah, why is everyone naked?
Like, I know.
Since they've gone to heaven.
Heaven's just like an absolute filth. And also all the kids. There's a naked kids walking around, mate. I don't want to go there.
It's that's like a bizarre thing with it. It's like everyone's naked. I like got me thinking. Maybe it's because like I think too much into these things, having like been just studying Nicolas Cage's films and well, just studying films in general. Is this thing? Is that a religious like point against the fashion industry? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
clothes aren't worthy for heaven, like, unless it's from a
born naked as God intended. Why have you
yeah.
put clothes on, you dirty bastard?
So, my final question I'm going to ask you in regards to the film, Carl,
Yeah.
is would you watch it again?
Do you know what? I mean, I don't think I'd rush to watch it again, but I definitely enjoyed it more than I thought I would after that first 10 minutes. I thought after the first 10 minutes, this is going to be such a slog. And actually, once they're on the plane, there's and I found there was some bits that were funny, that like bad funny, but there was some bits that were entertaining, and like it had enough. It was enough moments that I thought would. There were some moments that I thought were terrible, but funny enough that I was like, that is so bad, it's good
Yeah,
almost. Like the bit where the daughter goes from she's about to kill herself, and it turns out she's at the top of a bridge, so she gets reception and takes a phone call from her dad on the plane, and then has to go and make a runway. And like that transition from her about to commit suicide to stealing a motorbike to then commandeering a steamroller is one of the funniest bad transitions of like transport in a film I've ever seen. So there's bits that were so dumb that I was like, oh man, I couldn't turn it off now. This is too silly.
well, it's almost like a pastiche, like without knowing it, like because it kind of
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
anything that like brings you like to think of other films like you said Die Hard 2 is something I thought about a lot, especially with like
yeah,
the journalist on the plane. I just kept thinking of
yeah,
that real arsehole who's just like especially when he's around with his camera, like I've got to get the footage. It just reminded me of that guy who's in the bog in Die Hard 2 going,
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
up,
yeah,
I'm up here, like. And I just thought this could be a great, like in the way of like Airplane, a great like comedy film if they really
yeah,
lent
yeah,
into
yeah,
that. But I don't know. They wanted to kind of have their cake and eat it by making a thriller, but they were hamstrung by this
yeah, yeah, yeah,
religious like
definitely.
weight upon them.
Yeah, that's what I felt. But no, but yeah, I did not enjoy it. I enjoyed watching it. It was a bit of fun, and it just you had to sort of hold your nose a bit now and again.
And would you recommend people at home watch this film?
Definitely, if you've got nothing better to do currently, you might as well watch a sort of, again, it's sometimes fun to watch a bit of a shit film that, you know, you couldn't, if you watch a great film, you're gonna just, you sort of you're critically looking at it like how amazing this is. Other film, yeah, and anything that's thought of as good, you're sort of working out if you like it or not. Sometimes it's good to watch a film that you're pretty sure you're going to think is crap, just because you can switch off your critical faculties and just kick back and just sort of laugh along. And
Well, yeah, you've
there's
kind of
there's
got
a
to.
freedom to it, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got to have a bit of like, I don't know, you've got to have the peaks and trough like with everything in life. Like
Yeah,
if you don't have that real like bottom of the barrel stuff,
yeah.
then the highs won't be as high. So sometimes you've got to like
Absolutely.
treat yourself to a bit of Left Behind to really enjoy The Irishman.
I agree.
Well, that's perfect. Thanks, Carl,
Good,
for
mate.
coming and talking about this absolute plane crash of a film.
It's been fun.
And there we have it, the fantastic Carl Donnelly. I'm sure you agree. And if you're not listening to one of many of Carl Donnelly's podcasts, Two Vegan Idiots is one of them, and the Keith Cheggers podcast is the other, as well as a comedian called Carl Drinks Coffee. I would recommend them all. They are fantastic, and if you are lucky enough to see Carl in your local area, I know that comedy clubs are opening up as we speak, or there's new ways in which you can see comedy, whether that's online or in a pub garden somewhere or an outside venue, I would very much implore you to go see Carl Donnelly. Or, yeah, if you're out of this country, listen to his bloody podcasts. If you have opposing views to me and Carl, if you feel that Left Behind is a great film that needs the accolades, it didn't deserve those Razzies, then please feel free to get in touch with me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Caged In Pod. Or if you want to go a bit more long form, you can always hit me an email, which is cagedinpod@gmail.com. If you really feel like you want to support the podcast, you can do that over at Patreon, which is patreon.com/cagedinpod. And if you go on cagedinpod.limitedrun.com, you can get the amazing prints I have for sale with the amazing artist Tim Hornsby. They're fantastic. I'm going to say that because obviously I'm selling them. They're great. They're great. Go on all the social medias and you'll be able to see those. Be sure to join me next week when I'm talking to Anna Bogatska of the Final Girls podcast and the Next Supremes, where we will be talking about Paul Schrader's ill-fated dying of the light and his subsequent Renegade director's cut, Dark. As always, I have been Petrus Patsidis. I have been Caged In. You have been amazing. Thanks. Bye.